You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with Monday Night Football. Specifically Steelers-Giants. Specifically the Giants. Usually I'd start with the Steelers, but indulge me for a moment while I start with the Giants. I don't particularly like Giants fans. I think they're spoiled. I think they're bad fans. I mean, the way they treated Eli Manning at the end of his career was ridiculous. I think they delude themselves into thinking how good their team can really be. I mean, all you have to do is look to after the Buccaneers game last year, Daniel Jones' first start. You can see a million Giants fans immediately anointing this guy as the savior. These were the same people that just 5 months before that were killing the pick. I understand that, you always want the guy to do well. And I'm not saying if you hate the pick, you always have to want him to do bad. No. I didn't like the Sam Darnold pick at the time, but no one's rooting harder for him than me. But I just don't think the average Giants fan is very smart. And you saw that after last night's game. How can you look at that performance yesterday and tell me you're okay with how they played? How can you look at a game where your quarterback throws an asinine interception at the end of an epic drive and tell me that was a good loss? I'm not even saying there aren't good losses. There are some people who will say that. But you can lose in respectable ways. And it can inspire confidence in your team going forward. This is not that. You allowed Ben Roethlisberger, who hasn't thrown a football in over a year, throw 3 touchdowns against you. How is that acceptable? How is Benny Snell rushing for 113 yards acceptable to you? You know how many rushing yards he had last year? 426. He got more than a quarter of that against the Giants yesterday. How are you okay with all of those ridiculous drops that your wide receivers had? Evan Engram only caught 2 passes. You know how many targets he had? 7. How is Saquon Barkley, one of the best running backs in the NFL, rushing 15 times for only 6 yards acceptable to you? That's the second lowest total he's had in his career. The lowest was against the Jets, when he only got 1 yard. I was there. I heard all the Giants fans afterwards saying how bad their performance was. They said that Daniel Jones played great, and you know what? Against the Jets, he did. Darius Slayton played well too. And Slayton played well yesterday. I like Darius Slayton. But other than that, all I heard was Giants fans saying how bad their team was. And you know what? They were right. Why is that not happening here? What did you see yesterday that I missed? The 2 touchdowns to Slayton? Jones and Slayton like each other. Okay, fine. That's something you can build on. Your defense was terrible. Snell, looking like the second coming of Franco Harris. Roethlisberger and Smith-Schuster combining for 2 touchdowns. I almost won my fantasy matchup because of that. The offensive line got tossed around like a rented mule. What, are you happy because you recovered a muffed punt? That's the special teams genius that Joe Judge is? He knew that Deontay Johnson was going to muff that punt? Okay, fine. You know what you did after that? You went 3 and out. How do you go 3 and out after recovering a muffed punt inches away from the end zone? You have to settle for a field goal. How does that not infuriate you as a Giants fan? This was not a good loss for the Giants. Not even close. Daniel Jones showed why he is an extremely frustrating quarterback. He had moments yesterday where he looked great. And he also had moments where he looked terrible. I'm not even blaming him for the first interception. That was a great play by TJ Watt. But that second interception, he's rolling out left, throws it to the end zone. I could see it from a mile away that was going to be picked off if he threw it. How does an NFL quarterback not see that? Were there moments yesterday where the Giants looked good? Yes. Yes, I'm with you there. But there were more moments where the Giants looked terrible. That's why you got the loss. It's why you only scored 16 points. You scored 1 less point than the Jets did. Now, I'm not saying that the Giants were as bad as the Jets were in Week 1. No. I'm not saying that. I mean, what I'm really seeing to further Giants fans' so-called point is that they're saying the Giants were light years ahead of the Jets in their first game this year. Yes, I'm with you there, but that doesn't make you a good football team. The Jets played like garbage on Sunday. Did you listen to my recap? When I said just as much? Now, granted, I wasn't as hard on them as some people were. It's one game against a great defense. I did say that they played like garbage, but I wasn't going absolutely bonkers like some people were. I'm not saying those people were wrong, but I was able to look at this as just one game against a great defense. And if you want to tell me that that same logic applies to the Giants here, you can tell me that. And I'm with you there. But there's a middle ground between Jets fans saying, my team sucks, and Giants fans saying, my team looked good yesterday. You know what the middle ground is? I'll tell you what the middle ground is. The middle ground is saying, yes, my team looked bad, but it's one game. We can recover from this. We have 15 more games to go. The only thing that's settled is that we're not going to go undefeated. Let's look at what didn't work. Let's look at what did work. And use that to our advantage for Sunday. To say anything else is insane to me. I'm not begrudging the Jets fans for saying that their team looked like garbage and the season is looking like another dismal failure. I understand where they're coming from there, but it's one game. I just disagree with the notion that the season is already a lost cause. But I have more respect for the people saying that stuff about the Jets than I do what people are saying about the Giants. Giants fans are looking at that game yesterday and saying everything's okay. Yeah, we got the loss, but a lot of things went right. What game were you watching? You do know that if you hear Brandon Gordon and Charles Davis, you're playing Madden, right? Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit were on the call for you guys yesterday. And they were great. Fowler I wasn't crazy about. I thought he was a little monotone. And I don't get that when he's calling college football, but I can live with that. That's something that you actually can change. I liked Fowler yesterday. But I loved Herbstreit. I think Herbstreit's really smart. But going back to my original point. Were there some things that went right for the Giants yesterday? Yes. But there were many more things that went wrong. If you can't see that, take the Giants' hat off. I'm not saying this because I'm a Jets fan, and I hate the Giants. And I hate their fans. Not all Giants fans. But the majority of their fan base, I just don't like. I promise I'm not being biased here, but I understand the Jets fans' point of view in saying that their team is staring down another dismal season than I do the Giants fans saying, you know what, we looked good yesterday. I'm not even saying that I agree with the Jets fans saying that. I understand why they're saying it. Is there a part of me that thinks that? A small part. But again, it's one game. You can't write the season off. You can't tank for Trevor. Again, there's a middle ground between saying my team is going to go 0-16 and my team is going to go 15-1. Look, good win for the Steelers. Roethlisberger knocked off his rust. His connection with Juju Smith-Schuster is still there, which is good news for me. And the Steelers are going to be a good team this year. As for the Giants, you've got a lot of work to do. Moving on now to Titans-Broncos. And you want to talk about a Hollywood ending. You couldn't have scripted this game much better. Steven Gostkowski has one of the worst kicking nights I've ever seen. He missed 3 field goals and an extra point. I mean, it got to the point where Gostkowski should have left the building, gone to his hotel room, packed his bags, and just flown home. Because there was no way that the Titans would go back to him. But late in the game, Titans down by 1, 4th and 1, Mike Vrabel trusted his kicker. A very successful kicker in Gostkowski. A guy who's had a really good career. And Gostkowski splits the uprights to make a 25-yard chip shot. Let me tell you, there were a lot of people watching that game that thought he was going to miss that field goal. I mean, one of the field goals he missed was blocked. That wasn't his fault. But two of them he just yanked. And the extra point, there's no excuse to miss that. Alright, that's a 33-yard field goal. If your kicker missed a 33-yard field goal, you'd be furious with him. But that 25-yarder was the old school extra point. That's right about where an extra point would have been taken before they moved the extra point back. And you could see the jubilation on his face. You saw him pumping his fist. He was really happy. Good for him. Even if you're a Broncos fan, and I have a friend who's a Broncos fan, there had to be a little bit of you that was happy for him. I'm sure you were more upset that your team blew another late lead. The Broncos blew 3 leads last year when they led in the last 30 seconds of the fourth quarter. When they put that graphic up, my jaw almost hit the floor. You'd have a tough time trying to do that on purpose. I mean, again, I'm sure that you were upset that your team lost, but there had to be a little bit of you that was happy for Gostkowski. But the offensive game plan that the Titans put together was very interesting. Yes, Derrick Henry had 31 rushes, and he had 116 yards. You can't get upset at that. But he only averaged 3.7 yards per rush. And let me tell you, a lot of those runs were not that good. I thought the Broncos did a great job of limiting his effectiveness. Henry was still really, really good, but he wasn't great. And Ryan Tannehill threw the ball 43 times. If you would have told me that Ryan Tannehill was going to throw the ball 43 times yesterday and the Titans would win, I'd say you're crazy. The Broncos are going to pick off about 5 of those. But Tannehill played really, really well. 29 for 43 for 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. He got a lot of his pass catchers involved. 8 different Titans caught passes. 6 of them caught more than one. And one of them, Adam Humphries, nearly led me to fantasy football victory. Cortland Sutton was out for this game. And I had him on my fantasy team. Fortunately for me, I had Adam Humphries on my bench. So that was an easy swap. I'm thinking to myself, alright, I'm going to lose this week. This isn't going to be close. Nice try. Get him next week. But Humphries played well. He was the Titans' second leading receiver yesterday. 6 catches for 47 yards. That's not bad. Now, granted, my opponent had Derrick Henry, so I didn't have much of a chance, but I'll tell you, that final drive when Gostkowski kicked the field goal, if Humphries had caught a touchdown on that drive, I win. You know how many points I lost by? I'll tell you. 4.8 points. That's it. If Baker Mayfield throws one more touchdown, if Terry McLaurin catches a touchdown, if Humphries catches a touchdown, I win. I was so mad last night. I came this close to winning. But look, the Titans played really well in this game. They're the team that has a lot to be happy about, not the Giants. The other blue team. Yes, they tried really hard to lose. Yes, this game was a lot closer than it should have been. But you know what? They had a great drive at the end of the game. They got the ball to a point where you would need to be a paraplegic to not be able to kick it through the uprights. This was a good game for the Titans. But on the other side of things, I know that Broncos fans are going to be really upset about their team blowing another late lead. They have a right to be upset at that. And that can mask a lot of the good that came from this game. But try really hard to not let it get to that point. Locke looked really good. Completed 2/3 of his passes. Threw for 216 yards and a touchdown. Phillip Lindsay got hurt, so Melvin Gordon had to carry more of the load, and Gordon played great. That backfield of Gordon and Lindsay is going to be really scary this year. Noah Fant had a really good game, 5 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy had a couple drops. He had moments where you wanted to strangle him, but look, he's a rookie. It's his first NFL game. He's playing under the bright lights of Monday Night Football. Cut him some slack. He wasn't terrible. He caught 4 passes for 56 yards. He was the Broncos' second leading pass catcher. But when Courtland Sutton comes back, I'm going to be really excited to see how that dynamic works between him and Locke. From a fantasy perspective and a football fan's perspective, the Broncos have a scary skill position group. Moving on now to the NBA, and the Eastern Conference Finals are going to get underway tonight. Celtics Heat, it's going to be a great series. 2 really well-rounded teams. I think they match up really well with each other. This is going to be a dogfight. Make no mistake about it. For the Celtics to win this series, they have to get consistent production from their guards. Tatum and Brown have been great in this postseason. They're each averaging over 20 points. But Kemba Walker had moments during the Raptors series where he looked terrible. Same thing with Marcus Smart. I understand that Smart is more of a defensive player than he is an offensive player. But, look, when you're dropping about 20 points, I'm going to look at you as an offensive option. And Walker just needs to shoot the ball better. You look at his points per game in the playoffs this year, and it's not bad. It's actually pretty good, 19.6 points per game. But he's shooting 28.5% from beyond the arc. And when you're going up against a Heat team that has shooters up and down the lineup, that's not going to work. The Celtics need consistent guard play if they're going to win this series. The good thing for the Celtics is Gordon Hayward is going to come back at some point. Not tonight. He's out tonight. And he's probably not going to go on Thursday. But at some point you'll see him in this series. And that's going to give the Celtics a huge, huge, huge boost. Because Hayward rebounded from a dismal season last year to put together a really good season this year. His stats have taken a big jump. And if the Celtics can get him back to that form right away, watch out. But when you look at the Heat, they have playoff Jimmy Butler and a great supporting cast. Goran Dragic is averaging over 21 points per game in the playoffs. Bam Adebayo is averaging a double-double. And he actually leads the Heat in assists in the playoffs. He reminds me a lot of Jokic. He doesn't have the perimeter game that Jokic has, but in terms of that passing, very similar. Tyler Hero has had a really good playoff, so has Jay Crowder, Duncan Robinson, and Kelly Olynyk. This is a well-rounded Heat team. And they have a really smart coach in Eric Spoelstra. The Heat are well-rested. And Spoelstra probably used that time to constantly watch film on the Celtics. The fact that Spoelstra had that much time to think about this series, that's not a comforting thought for Celtics fans. Now, Brad Stevens is a really good coach also, but in these playoffs, I think Spoelstra has done a better job. He found a way to stifle the Pacers and the Bucks. And those series were really never in doubt once they got going. The Celtics needed a 7th game to bounce the Raptors. And you know what? I think this series is going to go 7 games. I think this is going to be a classic series. One that we're going to talk about for a long time. But ultimately, while I could very easily see the Heat winning this series, I think the Celtics just have a little more firepower, especially with Hayward coming back. He's the key to this series. If Hayward doesn't come back, or he comes back and looks really rusty, the Heat are going to win this series. But if he comes back and looks like the Hayward of old, the Celtics have this. Ultimately, I think Hayward is going to come back and be the Hayward of old. Celtics in 7. Moving on now to Nuggets Clippers. And my God, are the Clippers making me sweat. They were up 3-1. I was so confident in them. Then they lose a really close Game 5. They had a 12-point lead at the half. And at the end of 3, they were up 7. Then they get outscored by 13 in the 4th quarter. Okay, no biggie. You'll get him in Game 6, right? No! The Clippers were up by 19 at one point in Game 6. That game was over. Forget about it. You could turn it off and watch football. The Nuggets outscored the Clippers in the second half on Sunday 64-35. That is atrocious. Outside of Kawhi and Paul George, the Clippers are getting no offensive production. Marcus Morris is invisible. Ivica Zubac is invisible. Patrick Beverley is invisible. Lou Williams isn't doing what he needs to do. JaMychal Green isn't doing what he needs to do. Landry Shamet isn't doing what he needs to do. Montrezl Harrell isn't doing what he needs to do. If the Clippers blow this lead, it's going to go down as one of the worst choke jobs in NBA history. I mean, make no mistake about it, the Nuggets have all the momentum right now. Jokic is playing out of his mind. Jamal Murray has gotten going. Monte Morris off the bench has gotten going. The Nuggets could become the first team in NBA history to come back from 3-1 deficits in back-to-back series. And let me tell you, whoever wins this game tonight is going to be in trouble against the Lakers. The Lakers are going to be well rested. They're going to have recent film, a lot of time to dissect it. It wouldn't surprise me if the Lakers jumped out to an early 2-0 lead in this series, regardless of who they go up against, Nuggets or Clippers. I mean, I picked the Clippers to win the whole thing, as you know. I have to stick with them. But I'd be lying to you if I said I was very confident in picking the Clippers to win tonight. Moving on now to hockey. And the Dallas Stars made it official. They won the Clarence Campbell Bowl. They are going to the Stanley Cup Finals to most likely face the Lightning. And if you're Pete DeBoer, how did you get any sleep last night? That loss yesterday would have kept me up all night. The Golden Knights are up 1 with less than 6 minutes to go. Alex Tuck takes a ridiculously stupid tripping penalty that allows Joel Kiviranta to score. And let me tell you, Kiviranta's been quiet for most of the playoffs, but when he's decided to score, he's picked some good times. The game-tying goal yesterday, and Game 7 against the Avalanche, he has a hat trick, including a game-winning goal in overtime. To have a rookie like that who's not fazed by the bright lights, let me tell you, that's special. This kid's going to be around for a long time. And Zach Whitecloud with the delay of game, I know what he was trying to do, fighting for the puck. It just rolled up on him and he ended up shooting it over the glass. But all it takes is that one moment for the puck to not cooperate. You feel that pressure of the other player. I don't remember who it was off the top of my head. And you end up flipping the puck out of play. Your heart has to break for him. He had a really good series, really good playoffs, really good penalty killer. Actually, a very disciplined player. If you were to pick any Golden Knight to have a penalty in overtime, Whitecloud would probably be at the bottom of the list. I understand that Whitecloud doesn't have a lot of NHL experience, only 17 games, but he's only taken 2 penalties. And in the playoffs, very similar. 20 games, only 6 penalty minutes. Only 3 minors, but it was that third one that everyone's going to remember. No one's going to remember anything else. No one's going to remember how good you were before that. I'd be surprised if George McPhee brought him back. Speaking of McPhee, I know that Pete DeBoer did a really good job with the Golden Knights this year. Brought you to the conference finals and all. You didn't lose a game in round-robin play. You beat the Blackhawks and the Canucks to get to this point. But can you bring him back after that? I mean, I don't know who else you'd get. The only guy who would really be an improvement is Mike Babcock. But after what happened yesterday, I would not just give Pete DeBoer the full-time job. I don't care that one of the penalties was an accident. Under no circumstances can your team take 2 penalties that late. That's inexcusable. I mean, that's what sunk Don Cherry in Boston, the too many men on the ice penalty. The same thing could happen to DeBoer. If I'm McPhee, I'm definitely putting a call into Mike Babcock. But now it's time to preview Islanders Lightning. And for the Islanders, I don't want to give up all hope. You know, this team has proven to me that they play well with their backs up against the wall. Down 3-0 early in a game against the Flyers, they pull Varlamov. They come back and force the game into overtime. Game 3 of this series, all the momentum in the world is on the Lightning side, and the Islanders win. So I have a little sliver of hope, like 5%. The biggest thing for them is to just convert on their opportunities. After they fell behind 2-1, they actually had some good chances. They got the puck in deep, they made stuff happen, they had good puck movement, but Vasilevsky and the Lightning defense just stoned them. And that plays into my point about the Lightning. This is what they have to do to win. They have to continue using their talent advantage. All throughout this series, you've seen that the Lightning are by far and away the better team. You have to continue utilizing that if you're John Cooper. And Barry Trotz is going to jumble up his lines. He said that. He's going to try to force something. Trotz is desperate. I don't blame him for doing that. I don't blame him for being desperate. But the Lightning just need to use their skill advantage. It's just that simple. Moving on now to the other playoffs. No, not football. We've established that we're just 1 week into the season. No, not soccer. Baseball. There is big baseball news concerning their playoffs. They are going to play every game outside of the first round in a bubble. The ALDS and ALCS will be in Dodger Stadium and Petco Park. Petco Park is where the Padres play. And the NLDS and NLCS will be played at the Rangers Globe Life Field and the Astros Minute Maid Park. The World Series will then be held at Globe Life Field. For those of you wondering where the first round will be played, all games will be played in the higher seeds' home ballpark. So let's say the Rays and the Yankees match up in the first round. All games would be in Tropicana Field. No games at Yankee Stadium. Also, extra people could be allowed in the bubble. A big part of the players' concerns for instituting a bubble was that they'd be away from their families for a long period of time. Well, according to Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, families will be permitted to quarantine with players on contenders for 7 days leading into the postseason then remain together for the entirety of the playoff run. So in other words, Amy and Caden Cole can join Garrett when the Yankees are playing the Blue Jays and the Marlins. Then they can travel to wherever they need to go for the Yankees' first-round matchup. Assuming the Yankees don't get the higher seed, that is. Also, for the LDSs, the LCSs, and the World Series, fans could be permitted in a limited capacity. So book your tickets to Texas and California now, before they get too expensive. That's not set in stone, that's just been discussed. But, hey, we could get fans at MLB games this year. That's pretty good. Look, I don't mind any of these parameters that the MLB and the Players Association have established. But this speaks to a bigger issue. It's something that I've said for a while. What Major League Baseball has done in response to the coronavirus hasn't worked. They've still had a bunch of outbreaks. The Marlins, the Cardinals, the Mets, and the Giants. You want to tell me that the Mets and the Giants weren't as serious as the Marlins and Cardinals? You're right, but it still caused games to be postponed. The NFL hasn't had that issue. I understand it's only 1 week, but they got through it. Hockey's been fine, basketball's been fine, baseball hasn't. Major League Baseball failed in its duties to protect the players. They know that. That's why they're instituting a bubble. If they thought that what they were doing was working, they wouldn't have a bubble. Do you have any idea how expensive it's going to be to create bubbles in 2 states? I'd love to know how much money the NBA and the NHL put in exactly for their bubbles. But I can guarantee you, it was a lot. Imagine that doubled. That's what Major League Baseball is going to deal with. You want to tell me it's less teams? Okay, fine. But you're bringing the families with them. So, it's going to be similar to the amount of people that were there for the NHL and the NBA. I don't begrudge the league for allowing families in. That's the right decision. But the point I'm making is Rob Manfred is nothing short of a hypocrite. He is useless. The worst commissioner in baseball history before this year was pretty widely regarded as Spike Eckert. He was a former general, then he became baseball commissioner for some stupid reason. He did a terrible job, it's not worth getting into. Rob Manfred has given General Eckert a run for his money. A 60-game farce of a season, having everyone travel across their time zones, and then realizing that that was a stupid idea, so then instituting bubbles. I don't mind that you did this. I think it's the right decision to have bubbles. But you should have done this before. You should have done this to start the season. You jeopardized the health of every player, every coach, every member of clubhouse personnel in Major League Baseball. We don't know if there are going to be any deadly long-term effects to getting the coronavirus. But if there is, I'd expect lawsuits to be filed against Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred. Just come out and say that what we did failed. We realize that. We're sorry. We want to make sure that we get the playoffs done for the fans' sakes. I can respect that. But until he says that, shame on Commissioner Manfred. Speaking of Major League Baseball, there is a new majority owner that will be joining their ranks very soon. It is official. Steve Cohen has agreed to purchase the Mets. All that's left is for him to be approved by at least 23 of the current majority owners. So unless Steve Cohen has made 8 lifelong enemies among the owners, the Mets are getting a major cash infusion. Some parameters on the deal: Cohen will own 95% of the team. The Wilpons and the Katzes will each own 2.5%. And the deal values the Mets at about $2.475 billion. So Cohen is putting in over $2 billion to buy the team. The power of New York is real. Also, SNY is not in the deal. The Wilpons will still own that. So it's very possible that Cohen could look to move the Mets to another station. Whether it's a station like MSG or, something else. It's also possible that part of the agreement was that Cohen will keep the Mets on SNY, but the Wilpons will still own the network. Cohen would still get money from the cable deal, but he wouldn't own the network. Look, I made fun of Mets fans when Cohen's first try to buy the Mets fell through. But make no mistake about it. This is the best day in Mets franchise history since Game 7 of the 1986 World Series. The Wilpons are not bad owners, but they are bad owners for New York. The Mets were slated to have a payroll of over $181 million this year before the coronavirus happened. In any other market, the Wilpons are gods. In Tampa, they're gods. In Oakland, they're gods. But because Mets fans can look across the RFK Bridge to the Bronx and see the Steinbrenners put in more money than God to the Yankees, Mets fans want their team in that same vicinity when it comes to payroll. The reality is the Wilpons don't have the money to do that. Before the coronavirus, the Yankees' payroll this year was set to be just under $250 million. There are very few teams in the 4 major sports that could afford a payroll like that. You hear all the Mets fans say that the Wilpons are bad owners. They're bad owners for the Mets. They're bad owners for New York. They have put money into the team. Again, they've had huge payrolls. They went out and signed Jason Bay. They signed Yoenis Cespedes to big contracts. They okayed the Jacob deGrom contract. They okayed the Robinson Cano trade. They have put money into the team. They just haven't kept up with the Yankees. And when you see in the headlines that the Yankees signed Garrett Cole, Mets fans are gonna want something similar. The reality is the Wilpons don't have that money. They have the money for a market like Oakland or Tampa. They don't have the money for New York. And they've sold the Mets to someone who does have the money. According to Forbes, Steve Cohen has a net worth of $14.6 billion. For whatever it's worth, he made that money in hedge funds. So he has money to buy the Mets and then buy about 50 million private jets. The Mets will become instant players for big free agents. You want to tell me that Cohen may not put the money into the team? No one spends almost $2.5 billion on something and then decides to not properly maintain it. That would be the equivalent of buying an island for $2.5 billion and then letting pirates take it over. And you can tell that Cohen really wanted the team. He had a deal in February. It fell through. Cohen was relentless. He wouldn't take no for an answer. So he stuck with it, and he outbid the owners of the Sixers and the group that A-Rod was putting together. Or should I say J-Rod, because Jennifer Lopez was also in the deal. Supposedly, she was going to be the point person for the deal. She was going to be listed as the control person to Major League Baseball, not A-Rod. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but that's what they said. For Mets fans' sakes, I'm glad that A-Rod's group didn't buy the Mets. I don't think they'd have the money to maintain it. They just weren't getting a lot of big money people in the deal. The two biggest money people I saw linked to them were Vincent Viola and Mike Rapoli. Viola has a net worth, according to Forbes, of $2.6 billion. Mike Rapoli has a net worth of $1 billion. Could the two of them have combined to buy the Mets? Yeah, probably. But Viola would have had to put in a lot more money than Rapoli. And from what I was getting, just from reading all the reports, it didn't seem like that's what he wanted to do. So Rapoli probably would have had to put in more money. Maybe he could have gotten some loans, but the Mets have gotten in trouble with loans before. I don't think A-Rod's group ever had a real chance of buying the Mets. But Cohen has the money. He has the desire. If you were to write down on a piece of paper what you wanted as a Mets fan for qualities of the new Mets owner, you'd write down a list that would look a lot like the qualities that Steve Cohen has. The Mets are now going to compete with the Yankees in terms of free agents. This whole team is going to be rebuilt. Bye-bye Brody. Bye-bye Rojas. This is a great, great day for the Mets and their fans. And their fans deserve this, because they are great fans. The final bit of sports news that I want to talk about concerns Peter Laviolette taking over as head coach of the Capitals. He got a big deal to coach the Caps. 3 years at $15 million. But you know what? I think Laviolette is going to be worth it. You know I'm a big Peter Laviolette fan. Always have been. Even when he was with the Islanders. I really liked him. He took over the Hurricanes midway through the 03-04 season, and in his second year there, his first full year, he won a cup with them. Had a bad end to his tenure there. They never made the playoffs after that. But he went to the Flyers and was really successful. The shortened season in 12-13 screwed him over. And then he got off to a bad start in 13-14. So he got canned. The year after that, he went to the Predators, and he made the playoffs every year that he was there. I never thought the Predators should have fired him. I think Laviolette is one of the best coaches there is in hockey. This is a great move for the Capitals. He will be light years better than Todd Reirden. I still don't understand why the Capitals thought it was okay to replace a Stanley Cup winning coach with an unproven assistant. Now the Capitals found themselves another Stanley Cup winning coach. They should have never let Trotz go, but Laviolette's a damn good consolation prize. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that some people have a chip on their shoulder. But Billy Martin had a whole lumberyard.